So how can we get a specific HTML element instead of JavaScript? First of all, let's create a div, for example, and we have a little bit of text in there. So how can we get a reference to this div container instead of JavaScript, so we can later on, for example, change the content? In order to do so, we first of all can create a variable. This variable will store the reference to our div container in this case. And we can use any name we want to use. We could say div, for example. We could also say that or NPC. And in our case, let's just use NPC. So you see that actually anything works. We can now say that we want to get a reference to our document dot get element by tag name. And this one is going to be the right method for our purpose because we want to use the tag name to get a reference to this div right here. So we're going to use opening and closing brackets. And now we need to define the tag name. So what is the tag name of this div? The tag name is div. So we are going to say div right here. And now we can console.log npc right here, which is the variable name that we've defined for the reference to our tag name. We're going to go to our browser. You can see this is the text. And right here we have an HTML collection that holds this div right here that has a lot of data that we don't really need right now. And if I'm going to add another div instead of our index.html, or two more divs, you will see that we're going to get a bigger HTML collection. So now we have 3 divs instead of this collection. So the HTML tag name is an option, but as you can imagine, it's really hard to get a specific element right here. What if I wanted to get the second element, for example? And in order to do that, we can also use an ID, for example. So let's say we have a little bit of text right here, and now we have an ID, for example, that could be my minus text. Now we can also use this unique ID to fetch this paragraph. By saying, for example, const text is going to be equal to document. And now we can use getElementById. And right in those brackets, we need to define, in quotation marks again, the name of the ID that we've used for our paragraph right here. In our case, it's my minus text. So we're going to save that one. Now let's console.log our text. And you will see that this one works as well. So now we have a reference to our text, as you can see. There also exists the option to get a reference by class name. So now let's say this here is going to have a class of my minus second minus text. Let's copy that one. And now let's say const second text is going to be equal to document dot get element by class name, as you can see. And now we're just going to define, instead of quotation marks again, the class name. So my second text, for example. Let's save that one. Let's console.log our second text. And we are going to see in the console, we have this HTML collection again for our second text. So if we are using a class name, you already saw this one was a collection. So I can also add a lot of paragraphs right here, and our collection will just get bigger and bigger. So by using a class name, we can obviously get a lot of references because a class is not unique, whereas an ID is unique. So if you use an ID, you only get a single element. If you use a class, you can get a lot of elements. And now you can access the individual elements, for example, by using bracket notation and 0, for example, or the index of the element. So this works exactly as you would work with arrays, essentially. And now, as you can see, we're getting my second text right here. So the first one of those elements that has the class my minus second minus text. Now, let me delete all of this and let me show you that you can also use the query selector to achieve the same result by saying, for example, const text is going to be equal to document.querySelector. And as you can see, we have 2 methods for the query selector. We have query selector and query selector all. So if you only want to get one single element, so the first element that is found within the document that fulfills the requirements, then you're going to use query selector like so. Otherwise, you're going to use query selector all. And I'll show you the difference. If you're going to use query selector, you can access an ID, you can access a class, you can access a tag, and so on. If you want to access an ID, you're going to say hashtag. So we can, for example, say hashtag my minus text. So my minus text. And now let's console.log our text right here. And as you can see, we're getting this text right here in the console. Now we could also say we want to get dot my minus second minus text. So now we're getting a class by using the dot operator. And as you can see, we're getting my minus second minus class, but only one element this time because we used query selector and we did not use query selector all. So let me show you. If we use query selector all, we're getting all of those classes as a node list. So now we could, for example, access an individual text by using the index, for example, like so. So this one here should be the second item that has the index of 1. Now we can also use a tag, for example. So we can just say, let's get a p tag, for example. And again, we're getting this result. And now let me show you that this also outputs a lot of p tags. So I'm going to remove that one. And as you can see, we're again getting a node list. And we can also use querySelector, which will only give us the first paragraph. So by using the querySelector, you can get a class, an ID, or a tag name, doesn't really matter. If you use the getElementByTagName, you can only define a tag name. If you're going to use getElementById, you have to define an ID. And if you use getElementByClassName, then you have to define a class to get the element. So all of those methods work. There's not really one method that is the best one. It's in the end more about preference.